Welcome back, America. We're here with our friend, Mr. Conservative in the Senate. Ted Cruz is running for re-election to the Senate against Mr. Marxist Socialist. Nonetheless, Ted Cruz, it is my contention that this is the most lawless administration in American history, and I'd like your input on this, on a number of grounds. He's defied 2 Supreme Court decisions, and he brags about it. He has violated our immigration laws, and he is happy about it. He violates Title IX by redefining it in the Civil Rights Act to eliminate effectively women's sports. He's violating separation of powers by legislating on his own, by budgeting and spending on his own, by using regulations to get around Congress, where the EPA is running amok, and so are the other departments. He's impounding federal funds from Israel, despite the fact that you folks have voted to get armaments to Israel as fast as possible. He's violating the Impoundment Act and the Take Care Clause of the Constitution. He's using the federal bureaucracy to register voters in targeted Democrat areas. And he's unconstitutionally appointed through his attorney general a rogue prosecutor whose entire job is to harass, smear, indict, and they hope convict Donald Trump of something, which brings us to executive privilege, which I talked about in my opening statement. He has waived executive privilege over and over and over and over again to push out presidential documents during the Trump administration, ordering the archives to give it to the January 6th Stalinist Commission under Nancy Pelosi. He's all but destroyed executive privilege. And then a few days ago, all of a sudden, he asserts executive privilege at the request of the Attorney General, who's facing a contempt vote in the House, to cover up his audio of his interview, the text of which is out in the public, in order to protect himself from the election, which has no constitutional basis. So what do you make of all this?
You know, Mark, one of these days you're going to say something I disagree with, but it hasn't happened yet. Every word of what you just said is exactly right. That this is a brazen president. This is a brazen Department of Justice. Merrick Garland, you and I both know Merrick Garland. He spent 24 years as a judge. He actually had a good reputation as a Court of Appeals judge. I had some glimmer of hope that he might do the job with integrity. He has proven to be the most partisan and the most lawless attorney general in our nation's history. And you are right. This administration, listen, I've said a number of times, Donald Trump broke the Democrat Party. They hate him so much that their minds have been shattered, and they've convinced themselves that Trump is Adolf Hitler. And because Trump is Hitler, anything is justified to stop him. You talked about these ridiculous trials. In over 200 years, we have never once indicted a president or former president in our entire country's history until this past year, when the Democrats have done so 4 times. Every one of these cases is, number one, an abuse of power because they hate Donald Trump, but number 2, it is an assault on the American people. It's an assault on democracy. I got to say, I actually think Sigmund Freud is rolling over in his grave because the Democrats engage in Freudian projection at a level I've never seen. They beat their chest. They say, we're defending democracy. And they are engaged in an assault on democracy. And you mentioned the assertion of executive privilege. I actually view that as just mockery because it is a ludicrous claim. As you know well, executive privilege exists to protect the conversations between the president and his senior advisors. Now, mind you, the radical left doesn't care about executive privilege if it's a Republican president, and that's why Peter Navarro is in jail right now because he asserted executive privilege when Congress tried to get him to divulge his conversations with President Trump, and they sent him to jail over it, and they're about to send Steve Bannon to jail over the exact same thing. But in this instance, there's not even a credible claim of executive privilege. Why? Because when Joe Biden was talking with Robert Hur, he wasn't talking to a subordinate. He wasn't instructing a subordinate in his administration what to do. Look, if Joe Biden were having a conversation with Merrick Garland about the priorities of the Department of Justice, that could well be covered by executive privilege. But in this instance, Robert Hur was a special counsel. He was investigating Joe Biden for multiple felonies. Joe Biden was effectively a criminal defendant. That is not executive privilege. He was not setting policy at that moment moment, Robert Hur was not there as a subordinate. He was there as a prosecutor, and the claim is laughable. And by the way, Robert Hur concluded, yes, Joe Biden committed multiple felonies. He did so knowingly, willingly, brazenly, over and over and over again. And then on behalf of the Biden Department of Justice, he said, but we're not going to charge him because Joe Biden is not competent to stand trial. He's too old and senile. No jury would convict him. And yet, nonetheless, this person not competent to stand trial has the nuclear codes and remains our commander-in-chief.
When we come back, Ted Cruz, isn't that the point, which is this? The 25th Amendment is intended to deal with situations like this, where you have basically a disabled president. We know he's disabled. That's why they treat him like a calf in a cage. You know, that's why they don't let him out. That's why when he's shuffling from the helicopter, the staff blocks him. That's why he's had less press conferences than any president. That's why he doesn't do much public speaking without his talking points. He is the least available president to the public. They're trying to cover this up. That's why the debate standards have been set. No audience. He wants his own journalists. You can't interrupt them. Everything is built around Joe Biden's mental disabilities. Don't we as a people, they talk about the public interest, don't we have a right to know that the Democrats are going to nominate a man who may not be fit for president mentally and physically? Rather than calling that politics, isn't that exactly what our republic is about? That we need to know who these candidates are, given the power of the presidency? I want you to answer that when we return. We'll be right back.